Hi, Ancient World History. So today we're going to be starting a new unit on the Middle Ages. We're going to be focusing on the advancement of civilization of Europe from a collection of small kingdoms into large kingdoms and empires. Very, very exciting. We're going to be seeing the advancement of places such as France, such as the German state. We're going to see the growth of the Protestant Reformation, and we're going to see Europe not only trying to advance within their own continent, but expanding into other places, and exploring and setting up colonies and trade. Let's get started, and we're going to start with Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne's an interesting guy because he's not the biggest, most important king in European history. He wasn't necessarily the most powerful king in European history, but he's the first that changes Europe into a large collection of small independent states and creates the first large kingdom in Europe since the Roman Empire. So, here are our essential questions. What roles do individuals play in historic change? And I kind of just explained that with Charlemagne. 2, how are governments established, maintained, and changed? We're going to see how Charlemagne is able to create and maintain the kingdom that he creates for the Franks. And 3, how has Europe changed after the fall of the Roman Empire? Because Rome has been changed dramatically. You see, what happens when the Western Roman Empire falls? Remember, it was by Germanic invaders. These people from the German states who get pushed out because of the Huns and sack Rome, sack Roman territories, and the largest power in Rome, in fact one of the largest powers in the world, is now gone. There's a giant power void. And because the Roman Empire is gone, trade is incredibly disrupted. Government changes dramatically. Cities are abandoned because of the Roman Empire, and because Germanic invaders had completely different views on these things than the Roman Empire did. And this is really going to start the Middle Ages, which is going to be from 500 to 1500 CE, Common Era. Now, some people call these the Dark Ages. It really wasn't dark. There are some bad things that happened, 100 Years' War, Black Plague, but it was a time of innovation. Historians normally refer to this as the Middle Ages. So, when the Germanic invaders from, again, Eastern and Middle Europe move into the Roman Empire and sack Rome, attack villages, and the Roman government is disbanded, there are 4 main results of that. Number 1, cities are completely abandoned. The Roman Empire thrived on being a metropolitan civilization, but the Germanic people were not an urban civilization. They were agrarian. They moved around in groups, so cities are abandoned. And when cities are abandoned, learning declines because libraries and public works aren't around. And the technology centers of the world are always cities, and when the cities are abandoned, those technologies are abandoned as well, and the knowledge of how to create and maintain those technologies is abandoned too. 2, Greek language and culture is almost completely lost, and it actually isn't regained again until the Renaissance in the 1500s. 3, business and foreign trade collapses because, again, when you have an empire that is this large, it can trade within itself. But what's going to happen is when these Germanic tribes come in, you're going to have a lot of just small kingdoms. And what that's going to do is these kingdoms aren't going to have the trade routes, aren't going to have the trade emphasis that the Roman Empire did, and that collapses. And 4, 2 languages evolved from the language of Rome, Latin, and that would be French and Spanish. And you can see exactly how much these German invaders had ravaged Rome. Just look at the colors. You've got the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths and the Vandals and the Franks, and it's just crazy. Now, again, these Germanic people are very, very different than the Romans. And so when they come in, it's going to change Europe forever. You're going to have a lot of wars that are going to change the borders between these small Germanic kingdoms. And even though these Germanic kingdoms fill some of the power void left from the Roman Empire, believe it or not, the Christian church is actually going to be a force of order and security, is actually going to develop into a bit of a kingdom on its own. Now, the reason why Europe really falls behind in learning and technology is because Germans had loyalty towards their families, not necessarily government. And because they had ties to family and loyalty to their families, large communities really weren't popular. It was small communities that were governed by rules and traditions because it's based on family, not this large, extensive, bureaucratic government. What we're also going to have is a lot of small Germanic kingdoms instead of large kingdoms or empires like the Roman Empire, because Germanic warriors pledged their loyalty to a chief, not a commanding general of thousands upon thousands of troops. And most of these warriors actually lived in something called the Lord's Hall, which restricted the size of these armies, which is why you have small kingdoms in Europe when the Germanic peoples come in. A lot of times they'll call them barbarians. Really, they're not barbarians. Barbarians is a negative term that the Romans gave to the Germanic peoples. Now, what begins to change all this is a guy named Clovis. In modern-day France, there was a group of Germanic people called the Franks that controlled the old Roman province of Gaul. And what happens is the leader of the Franks, Clovis, is going to convert to Christianity in 496 Common Era. And once he converts to Christianity, he's going to start a military campaign to take more territory and unite the Franks. And by 511, and this is interesting, with the church's help, because the church is going to provide money and support, we're going to see that in a little bit, by that time, Clovis has united the Frank people. And you can see that in this green area right here, the kingdom of the Franks. Now, when the Franks are united, Clovis spends a lot of time converting the Franks to Christianity and sends out missionaries to convert other groups, not in his own empire, because to really create unity, a lot of times you have to have a common religion. If you have a lot of varying religions that are conflicting with each other, the people aren't going to be united. When the people aren't united, you have riots, you have rebellions. So from a stability standpoint within a government, you want to have a common religion. What Clovis also does is he encourages the building of monasteries. Monasteries are kind of like universities or large agricultural places where monks would go to study. These are men or women who would be called nuns to serve God and learn more about God. They would establish schools, and believe it or not, the most educated people in Europe during this time would have been monks and nuns, because they could read and write. And what they would do is they would transcribe the Bible, which is the holy book of Christianity, and transcribe it into Latin, and do these incredible, intricate art styles around it, as you can see here. Now, two of those important monks and nuns are Benedict and Scholastica. Now, it's interesting because when we get the name scholastics, different areas of learning, it actually comes from her. Now, what begins to happen after 590 is there's going to be a pope. A pope is the leader of the Catholic Christian Church. His name is Gregory I, or Gregory the Great, and he does a lot of things to reform the church's stance in Europe, the Catholic Church's stance in Europe. Now, you're probably saying, why you just say the church, Mr. Marlar? Well, because there is no other church. There's the Russian Orthodox and the Greek Orthodox, but they're on Eastern Europe. So Protestantism has not happened. Lutheranism, Baptists, Methodists, all of those different denominations haven't been created yet. So when I say the church, I mean the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church is going to become more secular and embrace political power, not just religious responsibility, during this time. And actually, the palace of the Pope is going to be the center of government in Rome. And actually, the church is going to have its own kingdom called the Papal States. Papal is referred to as Pope. What he's also going to do is use church money, because the Catholic Church has a lot of money from donations and land and things that they own. And they use it to actually create armies, help people who are poor, and negotiate treaties between kingdoms. So they start to become a political entity that can influence other kingdoms around them in Europe. And what happens when they do all this under Gregory I is a Christendom is created, which is a kingdom that is based on Christianity, extending its influence outside of Rome, which is the seat of Catholic power. That's where the Pope is based. Now, strangely enough, at this time, you didn't want to be king. Actually, king wasn't the most powerful office that you could have. The most powerful person in a kingdom is actually the mayor of the palace, or the major domo. And in 719, the major domo of the Frankish kingdom, his name is Charles Martel, defeats the Muslims from Spain, the Moors, at a battle called Tours in 732 CE. Now, this is a very important battle from a perspective of Western European history, because this is the battle that stops the advancement of the Moors into Europe. And so Charles Martel, from the Christian's perspective in Europe, is going to be a hero. Now, his son, whose name is going to be Pepin, is going to begin something called the Carolingian dynasty. And really, Pepin isn't incredibly important. What's going to be important is his son, Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne means Charles the Great, and he's going to become the new ruler of the Franks. And when he does, he starts to do some things that will extend the Frankish borders and create the first large-scale kingdom in Europe since the Roman Empire. Now, what he does is, through his army, he's going to unite Western Europe under one kingdom, and in the process spread Christianity through missionaries. Now, as he's doing that, in the year 800, he's also going to send his army to Rome to put down a riot and save the Pope at that time, whose name is Leo III. In gratitude for that act, the Pope is going to crown Charlemagne emperor and give him the title of not just emperor, but Roman emperor. So this is interesting, because when Charlemagne gets crowned, it's going to unite not only the Germanic power of Europe, because again, all the kingdoms were Germanic based, the Franks are a Germanic people, the church and its influence and power, and the idea of bringing up the Roman emperor again. Very significant at this point. Now, after this point, for years and years and years, if someone was crowned the Holy Roman Emperor, which we're going to see for many hundreds of years, the Pope always did it. Except, believe it or not, for Napoleon. Napoleon actually took the crown and put it on his own head, rather than letting the Pope crown him. Because when the Pope crowns an emperor, it's kind of the sense of, well, you know, I'm crowning you, so I'm really more important. Now, when Charlemagne reunites Western Europe, this is what his kingdom is going to look like. And you could see why this is significant, because again, this is the first time since the Roman Empire where there's a large kingdom in Europe, again, that's united. And when he unites this kingdom, the first thing he needs to do is take care of the nobles. Take care of these large, powerful men who own massive amounts of land, have a ton of wealth and influence, and could possibly be a challenge to his strength. So what he's going to do is he's going to use spies. to infiltrate into these nobles' homes, to report back to Charlemagne if there's any sort of traitorous talk. And also, Charlemagne's going to personally visit every part of his kingdom, so the nobles don't feel like, oh, well, Charlemagne's over there, but he's never going to come over here. It gives the message of accountability. What Charlemagne's also going to do to try to reverse the backstepping of education when the Roman Empire fell, he's going to encourage the opening of monasteries and schools to train monks and priests, because Charlemagne, again, his religion was Christianity. He thought that it was his responsibility not only to unite Western Europe, but also to unite under the religion of Christianity. Now, unfortunately, Charlemagne, who was an incredibly successful king, or Roman emperor, as the Pope would have said, dies in the year 814. And his son is going to rule poorly. His name is going to be Louis the Pious. Louis the Pious is going to have 3 sons. And as you can see in this picture, the kingdom of Charlemagne is fairly extensive. Just look at all this. And so what happens in 843 is they're going to divide divide Charlemagne's kingdom into 3 parts. And when they divide it, it's going to be done at something called the Treaty of Verdun. If you ever see Treaty of blank, that means that the treaty or the agreement was signed at that city. For instance, there have been dozens of treaties of Paris, because Paris had always been seen as an international place to create treaties. Now, there's going to be 3 kingdoms that are going to be creative. The Western Frankish kingdom, which is going to be green, is going to be under someone named Charles the Bold, one of Louis the Pious' sons. Then you have the central kingdom of Lothany, and the East Frankish kingdom of Louis the German. And this is what's going to happen after Charlemagne has died. Well, that's all we have today. I hope you've seen the significance of Charlemagne, see the interest of the rising power of the church and the Franks to fill the gap left by the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching.